Hey guys! Tonight we're slipping quietly into the dust-kissed streets of ancient Persia, more specifically, the imperial city of Susa. You're here for a very particular reason, to learn how the Persians brushed their teeth with pomegranate. Yes, pomegranate. That bright red fruit that's hard to open without staining your shirt forever. Yeah, that one. And tonight, you're not just hearing about it, you're living it. In sandals, with dry lips, probably without dental insurance. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love imagining all the little sleepy towns and cities we're connecting through this soft little corner of history. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wind here doesn't blow. It meanders. That's the only way to describe it. You've just stepped through the eastern gate of Susa, and immediately you're met with a breeze that smells like cardamom, sun-baked clay, and maybe a tiny bit of camel. But in a dignified way. This is no ordinary city. Susa has already lived through more than you probably ever will. Floods, empires, weddings, royal scandals, and a suspicious number of goats. The walls around you are high and tiled in glazed brick, faded with time but still managing to look more put together than you on a Monday morning. There are lions on the walls, lots of them, either symbolic guardians or just a sign the ancient Persians were really into cats. You adjust your sandals, new, still squeaky, and follow the main stone path into the city. The stones are uneven and slightly warm from the rising sun, and as you step, you notice that everything here moves in rhythm. The vendors setting up stalls, the workers unrolling bolts of fabric, even the pigeons seem to flap in slow motion, like they know this place prefers grace over speed. To your left, a man in a long indigo robe is meticulously arranging small clay jars on a woven mat. You pause, curious. He nods without looking at you, gently twisting the lid of one jar to reveal what looks like mashed fruit mixed with ash. Delicious. Not quite. Useful. Very. You don't know it yet, but you've just glimpsed your first sample of Persian toothpaste. A child runs past you barefoot, laughing and tossing dried fig halves in the air. His mother follows, carrying a basket of what you think might be toothbrushes, although they just look like short twigs with frayed ends. Spoiler alert, they're both. By the time you make it to the city's center, the sun has fully climbed the horizon. It's not hot, not yet, but warm enough to make your linen tunic stick a little under the arms. The air is dry, but it holds that rich, spice scent that tells you this city has been simmering for centuries. You're heading toward the royal district. You're told that's where the real dental magic happens. You're to witness something rare, the morning cleansing ritual of the nobility, and not just the rinse and spit kind. This is Persia, my friend. It's more ritual than routine. And here's a fun detail in ancient Persian etiquette. One did not speak until they had cleansed their mouth, not for spiritual reasons alone, but because it was considered impolite, or, as one scholar put it, brag was a form of diplomacy. History nerds are still arguing about whether that was symbolic or just a passive-aggressive way to say your morning breath is politically unacceptable. Anyway, you're not far now. You pass by a wall freshly painted with a poem, something about teeth being like stars in the mouth, and the white guards of soft words. You make a mental note to write that down, even though you already forgot the middle part. Eventually, a servant in crisp robes and soft leather sandals appears beside you. No words, just a gesture to follow. His pace is slow, almost floaty, like he's been trained by clouds. You do your best to keep up without tripping over your own cloak. As you approach the palace gate, something shifts. The city hum quiets. The wind holds its breath, and your own heartbeat slows to match the calm pace of this ancient place. You are about to step inside a world where hygiene, ritual, and a surprising amount of pomegranate come together, not in a dental commercial, but in a lifestyle you never knew existed. You take one more deep breath. It tastes faintly of mint and dust, and maybe just a hint of history. You step through the gate. You step into the palace, and instantly, something shifts. The air is cooler here, not cold, just precise, like someone carefully adjusted the temperature for maximum elegance. There's a subtle blend of rose water, sandalwood, and something faintly herbal. It smells dignified. You instinctively breathe a little quieter, as if your exhale might disturb the decor. Beneath your feet, the marble floor is smooth and slightly cool, its surface worn down by centuries of soft legless sandals and courtly hesitation. You try not to squeak. In yours, you borrowed them, and they make a noise like a duck politely clearing its throat. Your guide, a palace attendant who clearly skipped the part of his job description that includes small talk, leads you silently through a long corridor lined with towering columns. Each one is intricately carved, impossibly tall, and somehow gives the impression that this hallway has seen more treaties than you've seen Tuesdays. Finally, you arrive at a quiet chamber bathed in morning light. High windows let in golden sunbeams, filtered through gauzy curtains that sway like they've been performing the same slow dance for 500 years. In the center of the room sits a semicircle of nobles, men and women alike, dressed in soft linen robes the color of desert clouds. Their hair is tidy, their expressions still caught halfway between sleep and thought. No one speaks. They sit around a low, circular bronze basin, and before each of them lies a tooth care box. You're not kidding, it's a box just for all hygiene tools. And these aren't your plastic supermarket toothbrushes. No, these boxes are carved from ivory, inlaid with lapis lazuli, or shaped from sandalwood with impossibly delicate patterns. If aesthetic flossing were an Olympic sport, Persia would sweep the podium. You watch quietly, trying not to stare too obviously. As the ritual begins, one woman unwraps a slim stick of wood wrapped in silk, dips it delicately into a tiny jar of deep red paste, and begins to brush her teeth with slow, circular motions. It looks more like she's painting than cleaning, brushing with the reverence of someone preparing for a ceremony rather than a staff meeting. Another man pinches a fine, ash-colored powder between his fingers and spreads it along his teeth, like seasoning. Then, with great composure, he starts to chew on what looks like a scorched twig. You lean in slightly. It's a branch from the Salvadorese Persica tree. History's the OG toothbrush. A servant glides in, so quietly it's unnerving, and offers each noble a rinse from a tall ceramic jug filled with water steeped in mint and dried rose petals. Some swirl and spit. Others just press the cup to their lips, breathing in the steam like it's an offering. No one rushes. Every motion is graceful, intentional, like brushing away the cobwebs of dreams before facing the day. You glance around the room, absorbing the rhythm of this silence. There's something peaceful in the way they move, as if this act of cleaning their teeth is also a kind of meditation, a way to align mind, mouth, and morning. And believe it or not, speaking before you've done your oral cleansing is considered impolite in this setting. Not for reasons of etiquette alone, but because, according to some ancient sources, breath is a form of diplomacy. Of course, historians still argue about that. Some say it's a religious practice tied to Zoroastrian rituals of bodily purity. Others think it's just a polite excuse to avoid early morning conversation until your mouth is fully awake. Either way, it works. One noble dips her finger in a bit of fragrant powder and gently presses it along her gums. Another massages her cheeks in small circles, as if stimulating the jaw might help stimulate her opinions later in the day. You admire their commitment. Your own toothbrush, Back home, it's mostly just a soggy reminder of procrastination. The air smells of mint, rose, and the faintest hint of something smoky and tart pomegranate. Perhaps there's no conversation, no rushing, just this shared, ancient understanding. We begin the day by brushing not just our teeth, but our presence. And tonight, well, this morning in ancient Persia, you're brushing yours too. You're sitting on a small stone bench now, tucked into a shaded alcove just outside the palace chamber. Someone has thoughtfully handed you a cup of warm water infused with mint, and you sip it carefully, not because you're thirsty, but because everyone else is doing it with such reverence. You feel like not participating might offend the spirit of the water. A servant joins you, older, calm, with the kind of face that probably hasn't rushed in decades. Without a word, he places a mortar and pestle in front of you, along with a few unassuming ingredients: dried mint, a white powder that might be salt, a small chunk of resin, and a perfectly ripe pomegranate. You blink at it. Sure, you've eaten pomegranate before, mostly with a spoon, awkwardly, while trying not to stain your shirt, but no one's ever handed you one and said, "Here, let's clean your teeth with this." The servant cuts the fruit with a small copper knife. The moment the skin breaks, the scent rises, sweet, tart, earthy, a little aggressive for Savanum. If we're being honest, he begins scooping the seeds into the mortar. Not all of them, just the ones near the center. Too close to the rind and it gets bitter. He murmurs the first words he's spoken. You nod, as if you've always known this. Like, of course, obviously. Inner seed selection is key to oral hygiene. To the pomegranate pulp he adds the dried mint, a dash of fine charcoal. Yes, charcoal. Very trendy now, but old news here, and the white powder, which turns out to be natron, an ancient naturally occurring salt. Then, with the practiced calm of someone who probably listens to rocks for fun, he begins grinding. The pestle moves in slow, deliberate circles. The pulp softens. The mint breaks up. The charcoal streaks gray. You watch as the ingredients come together, slowly thickening into a reddish-brown paste, glistening slightly, sticky like jam, but somehow ancient-looking. He dips a soft bristle brush made from frayed tamarind wood into the paste and holds it out. You take it with mild suspicion. It's warm, slightly gritty. You brush your teeth with it gently, half expecting to regret your life choices. And it's not bad. It's sharp at first, the salt and the natron punch through, like your teeth just had a conversation with a lemon, but then the mint cools it all down, and the pomegranate lingers with a kind of subtle sweetness that's weirdly calming. It's not a minty fresh experience. More like, my mouth feels like it just got tucked into bed by an herbalist. You raise your eyebrows. The servant just smiles and nods. We call it anahata, after the goddess of water. Of course you do. According to what you're told next, this paste wasn't just about cleanliness. It was used for ritual purification, medicinal protection, and even social signaling. The finer your pomegranate source, the more sophisticated your morning routine. It was like ancient Persia's version of luxury skincare, just for your mouth. Some nobles added dried rose petals or ground sapphire. Yes, actual sapphire, good for the gums, supposedly, while others preferred their paste mixed with clove, turmeric, or powdered almond shell for extra exfoliation. Some even swore by a few drops of sheep's milk, which frankly seems like a bold move. Modern scholars still debate whether this kind of paste was truly widespread or reserved for the elite. There's no universal agreement. Some historians argue it was mainly symbolic, while others insist it had real antibacterial properties. You're just glad your breath smells like a herb garden now instead of old camel. You finish brushing. The servant hands you a linen cloth to dab your mouth. No rinsing. You're told the ingredients are meant to stay with you for a while. Kind of like a good poem. Or glitter. He then presses a small corked jar of the paste into your hands, a souvenir. You're not sure what to do with it, but you accept it like a child handed a ceremonial sword awkwardly, and with too much respect. And with that, he leaves you alone again. The wind picks up slightly, carrying with it the scent of sun, warm stone, and distant spice. You run your tongue over your teeth. They feel strangely wise. You've brushed your teeth with pomegranate. You've joined a morning ritual from 2,500 years ago. And honestly, your toothpaste back home is looking a little boring now. You're back in the palace courtyard now, seated under the twisted branches of an ancient pistachio tree. Its shade flickers gently as the morning sun filters through the leaves, casting slow-moving patterns on the stone tiles. There's a low hum in the distance, bees, probably, and the occasional sound of a sandal scuffing marble. A different servant joins you. He's younger than the last, with ink on his fingers and a pouch at his belt that smells like a combination of pine sap and mystery. He doesn't say much, just sits down across from you and begins carefully emptying the pouch. Inside are chunks of tree resin, irregular, golden pieces that look like candy but absolutely are not. He selects one, rolls it in his fingers a few times, and then hands it to you like a sacred offering. You pop it into your mouth. Chewing it is like trying to eat the corner of a library. It's dense, sticky, and oathy, but then it begins to soften. As you chew, it releases a sharp piney taste, followed by a kind of peppery warmth that sits comfortably on your tongue. The experience is unexpectedly grounding, like forest therapy for your teeth. This one is mastics, he says. From Chios. The Greeks chew it too. You nod. Still chewing. The flavor deepens. Turns out, in ancient Persia, oral hygiene wasn't just a one-time event in the morning, it was a continuous act. Chewing tree resins throughout the day was common. Not only did it clean the mouth, it helped stave off hunger, calm the nerves, and allegedly kept your words gentler and aligned. You look down as he unpacks more varieties. A deep amber resin from the Pistrita tree, slightly sweeter, a favorite of courtiers. A dark, sticky chunk labeled more, good for sorghums and spiritual reflection, though it smells faintly like funeral incense. A pale, crumbly piece wrapped in cloth, this one's made from fig sap and dried herbs, used by traveling merchants to stay alert on the road. It tastes like a disagreement between mint and licorice. Some chews are mixed with ground cloves or coriander seed. Others are wrapped in thin strips of linen soaked in rose water, before being dried again in the sun. One particular favorite, according to your guide, is bitumen gum, a shiny black chewable made from natural asphalt. You blink at this. He shrugs, seals the mouth, keeps out bad spirits, and sand. Of course, modern scholars aren't entirely sold on the idea that bitumen was actually good for you. Some think it was a spiritual tradition. Others insist it was simply what happens when dental science and superstition share a room for too long. Still chewing, you ask with your eyebrows how people knew when to use which one. He laughs quietly. Different gums for different moods, he says. Some people chew when they're thinking. Some chew when they're praying. Some chew just to stop themselves from saying something stupid. You relate deeply to that last one. By this point, your jaw is getting a workout. You're still chewing the mastics, and it hasn't lost its flavor yet, which is either impressive or slightly unsettling. You're told the elite sometimes chewed for hours, especially during meetings or long walks. Like ancient Persian breath-freshening podcasts. One noble reportedly had a personal gum blender, a servant whose only job was to warm and mix custom resin blends for different events. You're not saying you envy him, but also, yes, you are. That sounds amazing. Eventually, Your guide packs away the remaining pieces, carefully retying the pouch. Before he stands, he hands you one last item, a tiny square of linen folded neatly on a thin strip of dried tree bark. Just in case, he says. This one's for long silences. You pocket it without hesitation. You don't know what it does, but it feels important. The wind picks up again, carrying the scent of crushed herbs and something vaguely citrus. Why? You lean back against the tree, resin still tucked in your cheek, and realize your mouth has never felt this unchantly involved in your life. And somewhere in the background, you swear you hear someone else chewing too, softly, thoughtfully, like they're walking through a secret. The royal rituals were impressive, elegant, refined, and frankly a little intimidating. But now you find yourself stepping back into the city of Susa, this time headed somewhere a little more grounded. The bazaar. If the palace was a harp string gently plucked, the market is more of a tambourine, vibrant, rhythmic, and just the right amount of chaotic. It's still early, so the crowds haven't fully arrived yet, but the merchants are already halfway through their morning routines, unrolling rugs, adjusting baskets of figs, or dusting off copper pots like they're preparing for an especially picky god to drop by. You take a slow walk past spice stalls and fabric merchants, past displays of dried apricots and someone selling what looks suspiciously like an entire roasted peacock, with decorative feathers still attached, bold. But you're here with a very specific curiosity, ancient Persian dental tools. And wouldn't you know it, they're everywhere. At a small corner stall, shaded by a canopy made of reed mats, a woman with a gold nose ring is arranging bundles of thin wooden sticks. Some are dark, some pale, all of them tied with colored string. These are chew sticks, she tells you. Salvador, pomegranate, fig, tamarind. She taps one. This one is soft for morning moods. You pick it up. The end is already lightly frayed, pre-chewed, or perhaps prepared with a little knife. The texture reminds you of a tiny, leafy paintbrush. You try to imagine walking around all day with one of these tucked behind your ear like a dental cowboy. At the next stall, a younger man is carving tiny handles onto toothpicks, each one a miniature piece of art. Some are shaped like lions, others like crescent moons. One is painted with cobalt stripes. He points to one engraved with a phrase in Old Persian. You ask what it says. He shrugs. Something like, "Silence is best when breath is sour." It's romantic. You buy it immediately. Then there are the powders. Jars upon jars of them, neatly arranged in baskets like little jars of seasoning. A few popular blends catch your eye: charred date seed, clove for when you've eaten too much lamb, fennel, sea salt, and crushed mint labeled for lovers and poets. Powdered oyster shell and cinnamon, apparently good for whitening, and possibly a sign of wealth-related overcompensation. A small boy tries to sell you something he calls a tooth comb. You're skeptical. It looks like a very tiny rake. He insists it's for massaging the gums. You buy one just to be polite, then spend the next 10 minutes wondering if he just sold you a doll's back scratcher. Still, there's a surprising consistency across all these tools, a kind of thoughtful craftsmanship. Nothing here is mass-produced. Each item seems personal, designed to make something mundane feel sacred, or at least enjoyable. You come across a stall with ceramic rinse cups, each painted with slightly exaggerated facial expressions, wide mouths, huge teeth. Some even have inscriptions around the rim. One reads, "Clean teeth, clean fate." Another says, "Speak not until the mouth is ready." You try not to read too much into that one. A few steps away, a scholarly-looking merchant beckons you over with a piece of folded parchment. He unrolls it to reveal a hand-drawn chart, almost like a periodic table for ancient dental tools. You spot symbols for river salt, mint vinegar, and something labeled tiger tree oil. He smiles and says, "We still don't know what that one was, but they believed in it. Historians today would probably agree that some of these substances worked, some didn't, and some were a mix of hope, habit, and a dash of placebo like most health trends, ancient or otherwise. You make your final purchase a tiny ivory box filled with a mystery powder labeled simply Breathe. You don't know what it's for. You don't care. You just like the name. As you head back toward the palace, arms full of chew sticks, powders, and whatever the tooth comb thing is, you notice something strange. Your mouth feels ugly, proud, like it's finally being treated with the same respect as the rest of you. You've shopped for your smile in a 5th century BCE marketplace. You've bought ancient floss with a lion carved into it. You, my friend, are now part of the great Persian oral tradition, and honestly, your toothbrush back home might start getting jealous. You're back near the palace now, just beyond the inner gardens, not quite inside the royal world anymore, but definitely no longer in the chaos of the bazaar either. It's that in-between space, the kind of place where sandals are dusty but still expensive, and where people are both incredibly clean and quietly exhausted. You've seen a lot already. The royal brushing rituals, the pomegranate paste production, a child selling you what might be a tiny rake for gums. But now, something hits you. Not everyone in Susa gets rose water and carved ivory picks to maintain their molars. So today, you ask a question that makes your palace guide pause. What about the regular people? The ones who don't live in marble houses and brush their teeth in silence while harp music plays. He blinks, considers, then simply says, "Follow me." Your LED through a smaller, less decorative gate and into the residential quarters of the city, still within the palace walls. Technically, but this is where scribes, craftsmen, and servants live. Not poor, but definitely not royal. Here, everything feels a little more lived in. You see baskets drying in the sun, clay ovens still warm from baking flatbread, and the laundry strung between columns like someone finally realized sunlight was free. A girl balances a bucket of well water on her hip, chatting with a boy chewing thoughtfully on a branch. You recognize the branch, Salvador again. Still stylish, still effective, just not imported from somewhere with epic poetry attached. In one shaded courtyard, you find a few women gathered around a basin, brushing their teeth with tricks and powders that seem, well, a little more homemade. One dips her frayed stick into crushed sesame seeds mixed with salt, another into a gritty mix of dried orange peel and date ash. No ivory tools here. Their dental kits fit neatly in a folded cloth pouch, tied at the waist. But the ritual is the same: brush, rinse, sit for a moment in quiet. Maybe it's not about wealth after all. Maybe this whole thing, cleaning your teeth before speaking, before facing the world, is just a cultural reflex, a quiet nod to dignity. Whether you're wearing silk or clay-dusted linen, your guide points to a young man who appears to be a junior scribe, based on the ink stains on his sleeves. His toothbrush, a goat hair brush stuck into the end of a quill, improvised, kind of genius, possibly unsanitary. Still, it works. "I made it myself," he says, proudly. You nod. It shows. Also, mildly terrifying. Nearby, you see a little boy practicing what seems to be a mouth game. He's biting on different seeds and trying to crack them, without using his molars. You ask what he's doing. His older sister replies, he's learning how to keep his front teeth strong, and to stop talking while eating. Practical and polite. Somewhere in the corner, a woman is soaking sticks in vinegar, prepping tomorrow's supply of chew tools. They'll sit overnight, drying on the cloth to be crisp by sunrise. You ask what the vinegar does. She says, kills yesterday's breath. You believe her. No scientific proof necessary. Historians still argue about whether there was a Massive difference in dental health between classes in ancient Persia. Some claim the nobles had worse teeth from ritual diets and soft foods, while commoners kept their stronger through constant use and less sugar. Others say it was just luck, genetics, grit, and maybe divine intervention in the form of bitter resin. As you sit on a low step, a woman offers you a small cup of rinse. It's not rose water, but it smells like thyme and smoke, and you take it gratefully. It burns a little, in a good way. Looking around, you realize the palace may have had elegance, but here in the quiet courtyards and shared wells, there's something even better. Consistency, intimacy, the kind of ritual that comes not from wealth, but from rhythm. Because whether it's sapphire-dusted pomegranate paste or a fig ash twig soaked in vinegar, every mouth here still starts the day the same way, with care, and with silence. And in some way, maybe that's what made this whole empire hold together for so long. You're back inside the palace walls now, but not in the usual polished corridors with harp music and swaying curtains. This one is quieter, less decorative, more functional, a little dusty in the corners. Your guide gestures toward a low wooden door with bronze hinges. This, he says with the air of someone revealing something mildly unsettling but fascinating, is where the court-tooth doctor works. The words alone spark images in your mind. Tweezers, smoke, maybe a potion or two. You don't know whether to be excited or afraid. You enter the room and are immediately hit by the scent of clove, vinegar, and what can only be described as old tree. There are shelves lining every wall, packed with ceramic jars, tightly wrapped bundles, metal instruments, and scrolls tucked into cubbyholes. At the center of it all is a man in layered linen robes, hunched over a small fire. He looks up slowly, squints at you, and says with just the right mix of exhaustion and theatrical flair, "Sit." You look like someone whose gums are thinking impure thoughts. You blink, then sit. He opens a box. It creaks. Inside, an array of gleaming bronze tools, some of which look familiar: tiny scrapers, carved picks. Others look like they belong on a battlefield or inside a music box. You spot a long, spoon-like scraper with ridges, a tweezer with tiny teeth on the ends, a bone-handled gum massager with a jade sphere on top, something that looks suspiciously like a tooth polisher crossed with a fishing hook. These are for advanced care, he explains, running a cloth over the hook. Cracked molars, inflamed gums, whispering breath demons. You know, the usual. He shows you a paste made from burnt juniper, vinegar, and sheep's milk curds, meant to soothe the inner tooth spirit. You smile politely. Internally, your inner tooth spirit is planning an escape. Another tool resembles a flat paddle carved from tortoiseshell, used to press down the tongue, he says, so I can see the back teeth, but also to silence loud patients. You nod respectfully and promise to never be loud again. He opens a jar of powder that smells like fennel and pain. This, he says proudly, can stop a toothache in 1 minute. You ask, what's in it? He leans in dramatically and whispers, I have no idea. My grandfather made it. It just works. Historians today have no clear picture of what tooth doctors in Persia actually did on a daily basis. Some think they were obelisks who dabbled in dental care. Others argue they were surgeons in disguise, stepping in only when things got truly dire, like abscess meets poetry night. Level of dire. You're shown a scroll containing tooth diagrams. They're utterly artistic, teeth drawn like miniature cities, each labeled with terms like gate of grain, incisors, and silent guard. Molars. It's unclear whether this is actual anatomy or a poetic reinterpretation. The doctor shrugs when you ask. Teeth are mysterious. That's why I respect them. He offers you a sample of tooth soot, a black powder made from burnt almonds and crushed date pits. You apply it gently to your gums with your finger. It tingles a lot, not painfully, just enough to remind you that your mouth is, in fact, alive. As you prepare to leave, he insists on sending you off with a basic care kit, a satchel containing a chew stick, tamarind, medium soft, a pouch of phenyl powder, and oddly, a very small mirror. What's the mirror for? You ask. He gives you a knowing smile, so you can look at your own mouth. That's where truth lives. And sometimes leftover lentils. You leave the room both enlightened and mildly terrified. But your gums feel amazing. And somewhere deep inside, you now believe that tooth doctors might have been the original philosophers, just ones with sharper tools and slightly fewer metaphors. You're standing in a narrow stone corridor now, lined with lamps that haven't been lit yet. Their oil still cold. The morning light hasn't reached this far in. And for a moment, you feel like you've wandered into a different building entirely, one where time ticks more slowly, where whispers hang in the air like incense. Your guide gestures toward a quiet chamber up ahead. This is not a bathing room, he says, lowering his voice. It's a cleansing space for the spirit and the mouth. You nod, because what else are you supposed to say to that? Inside, you find a small group gathered around a central pool. They're not bathing. They're not even talking. One man is holding a stick of mauve resin between his teeth, eyes closed. A woman next to him gently rubs a damp cloth along her jawline, humming quietly under her breath. In the corner, someone's fanning a slow-burning blend of herbs, rosemary, mint, and something sharp that clears your sinuses into seconds flat. This isn't a dental appointment. This is a ritual. According to your guide, this room is modeled after the teachings of Zoroastrian purification. The belief was simple, but deeply serious. A clean body prepares the soul, but a clean mouth prepares the truth, which sounds poetic, until you realize they took it extremely literally. You couldn't let a prayer, deliver a message, or even enter certain rooms unless your mouth had been ritually cleansed. That meant brushing with natural powders, rinsing with sacred herbs, and chewing something bitter, usually wormwood or vinegar-soaked bark, to sharpen the tongue and silence the ego. You take a seat quietly and watch as someone begins the process, step by step. A light brush with a pomegranate and charcoal paste, a rinse from a copper vessel filled with rose-fine water. 3. Slow breaths while pressing the tip of the tongue to the roof of the mouth, a final chew of a clearing root, which looks suspiciously like licorice, but tastes more like betrayal. You're offered a turn, politely, gently, as if invited into a slow conversation rather than a ceremony. You go through each motion, brushing, rinsing, chewing, and something strange happens. Not physical, mental. Your brain slows down. Your shoulders drop. Your thoughts stop narrating themselves in capital letters. It feels clean, not just in your mouth, but in your focus. Like someone took a duster to your attention span. Some modern historians chalk these rituals up to over-formality. Others argue it was early psychological conditioning, a way to train people to prepare for responsibility by preparing their breath. A few even suggest that the rituals doubled as early public health campaigns, hidden inside theology. But sitting here, you're less interested in academic theories and more impressed that your tongue feels more centered than it has in years. You've never thought of your mouth as a sacred space before. Mostly, it's just the thing that forgets lyrics and bites forks too aggressively. But here, in this stone chamber with its faint herbal haze and respectful silence, your mouth feels like a gateway, not just for food or words, but for intention. You finish your rinse, gently place the cup back on its stand, and return to your seat. No one claps, no one nods. You simply sit, together, in the stillness, a group of strangers who have all just brushed their way into clarity. When you finally step out of the room and into the sun again, The world looks the same, but your mouth feels like it's glowing a little. Not with mint or magic, just with the soft aftertaste of attention. And for the first time, you realize maybe brushing your teeth is the oldest form of meditation. You're sitting in a palace courtyard now, beneath a fig tree so old it probably remembers the invention of socks. The stone bench beneath you is cool. The kind of cool that suggests it's been in the shade longer than human memory. A breeze rustles the leaves above you, and somewhere in the distance, someone is tuning a stringed instrument that may or may not be in tune with your current mood. Your guide joins you again, this time holding a small scroll. He doesn't unroll it right away. Instead, he simply says, "Do you want to hear a love poem?" You nod, because obviously yes. He clears his throat dramatically and begins to read. It starts off how you'd expect: moonlight, soft sighs, long eyelashes that defy physics. But then, a line appears that catches you completely off guard. Your teeth, rows of ivory stars, guard the gate of your tender voice. You blink. He continues, "Your breath, scented with rose and ash, gives shape to my name in the night." Okay, this love poem is about her mouth. Not just lips, not just smiles, but actual dental infrastructure. And apparently, this isn't unusual. In ancient Persian poetry, especially among court poets and mystics, teeth were a thing, not in a creepy way. In my love is so complete. I even adore the part of you that helps you pronounce my name correctly kind of way. You're shown a few more verses, each one containing some variation of teeth like polished paws that never lie, gums so healthy they shame the gardens of Babylon. Your bite, delicate yet decisive, could shame kings and convince gods. Honestly, you're into it. It turns out, oral imagery was a key part of Persian literary culture, not just for love poems, but for spiritual verses too. Poets often described wisdom as spoken through clean teeth, or compared dishonesty to decay behind a golden smile. In one famous mystic poem, the lover's yearning is described as so intense, he chewed bitter herbs every morning just to taste her absence. Intense, possibly dental erosion inducing, still poetic. Your guide explains that during the Achaemenid era and beyond, poetry was one of the highest forms of social currency, even more than gold or land. If someone wrote you a good couplet, it could earn you dinner. If someone insulted your breath in verse, that was a duel. He shares a few anecdotes. A prince once rejected a marriage proposal by writing, "Her eyes are stars, but her breath speaks of unripe dates." A poet gained royal favor by comparing the queen's molars to moonlit domes that guard wisdom's gate. One scribe was reportedly fired for rhyming gums with crumbs. Apparently, that was considered crass. Historians still debate how seriously these mouth metaphors were taken. Some say it was just poetic convention, like all those 18th century English poems about ankles. Others believe there was a genuine cultural link between oral cleanliness and personal virtue, that your mouth wasn't just part of your body, but part of your moral architecture. You sit there, considering all this, chewing thoughtfully on a piece of resin you were gifted earlier, the kind mixed with clove and orange peel. It feels oddly appropriate, maybe even romantic, because for all its practical uses, your mouth does say everything for you: love, grief, hunger, truth. So maybe it makes sense that people once wrote whole odes to it. Maybe keeping your teeth clean wasn't just for health or etiquette, but for poetry itself. Your guide rolls up the scroll and hands it to you. A gift. You thank him. You'll probably never look at toothpaste again without hearing the phrase, "Ivory stars behind ruby lips." And somewhere deep in your heart, or maybe just behind your molars, you kind of want someone to write a love poem about your flossing habits, too. It's later in the day now, and the palace is quieter. Most of the nobles are off doing important empire-running things, or Just as likely, taking a very well-deserved midday nap under embroidered pillows the size of small boats. But down in the servant courtyards, something very different is happening. Children, dozens of them, running around barefoot, laughing, yelling, and somehow brushing their teeth in the middle of it all. You're ushered to a shaded stone bench by a woman who's far too calm for someone supervising a group of tiny whirlwinds. She smiles as she watches two small boys squatting by a flat piece of tile, fiercely competing in what looks like a seed-cracking game. They're playing Dan, seed teeth, she explains, helps them learn how to chew the right way with control, not force. You lean in and see the boys using their front teeth to crack open small roasted pomegranate seeds, not biting down hard, but tapping, nudging, like they're training their mouths to be gentle tools, not blunt weapons. One seed pops open with a satisfying click, and the boy beams like he's just bested the king in chess. Another group of kids are playing with chew sticks, not using them to brush, but trading them like collectibles. This one's tamarind. One girl brags. Smells like sour dreams. A boy counters. Mine's fig wood. It's for clever teeth. The butter gets heated. A judge is called. Justice is served with a piece of salted plum. Nearby, a pair of twin sisters are making mouth masks out of dried leaves, poking holes to breathe through while they chew on dried mint stems inside. They claim it helps them speak like queens. You're not sure if it's medically accurate, but you admire the confidence. Turns out, oral care starts very early in Persia, and it's not a chore. It's a game, a challenge, even a form of storytelling. Each family has their own chewing rituals. For toddlers, some sing songs about mothers marching like soldiers. Others reward proper brushing technique with little honey-dipped nuts, followed immediately by another rinse balance. Always, one grandfather teaches his grandson to chew while walking, to strengthen concentration. Another family uses story stones, smooth pebbles etched with different symbols that children select blindly. Each symbol corresponds to a mouth-related activity. Brush with salt, rinse with sour milk, chew licorice bark until you can spell your name without moving your lips. You ask, do they enjoy it? The supervising woman laughs softly. Of course not. They protest like it's war, but they grow up believing their teeth are part of their personality. You take care of your teeth. You take care of your name. It's not just hygiene, it's identity. Some modern scholars argue that ancient Persians were among the first cultures to view oral habits as a kind of civic duty, taught from childhood. Others say that's romanticizing it, and it was simply a practical way to prevent early tooth loss in a pre-dentist era. You watch one little boy hold up a perfect pomegranate seed between his teeth without cracking it. The group applauds. He grins wide, a missing front tooth creating the most joyful gap you've ever seen. It's in these games, these little rituals, that you realize the Persian dental obsession wasn't just about silk robes and elite rinses. It started on the ground, with bare feet, sticky fingers, and laughter that echoed louder than any philosophy scroll. And if you ever doubted the power of a clean mouth to shape culture, just try to win a seed-cracking match against a 6-year-old who's been training his incisors like it's an Olympic event. You lose. Happily. You've wandered back toward the outer courtyard now, following your nose more than your guide. And your nose is right, someone's cooking. The air smells like roasted eggplant, grilled lamb, a whisper of cardamom, and that indefinable scent of flatbread getting just the right amount of char. A servant smiles as you approach. You've come at the right time, she says, handing you a fig wrapped in something suspiciously shiny. Lunch, and possibly a dental emergency. You soon discover why. Persian cuisine, especially during the height of the Achaemenid Empire, was delicious. Yes, but also a challenge to the average mauler. The food here isn't soft or smooth. It's full of seeds, spices, and roasted textures that test the limits of every tooth. You bite into a honey-glazed almond ball and feel like your jaw is being auditioned for a grinding stone commercial. A chunk of pomegranate marinated lamb is so tender it melts, except for the occasional stealth bone fragment that reminds you why everyone carries a personal toothpick case, which, by the way, is a thing. Nobles had tiny engraved silver tubes filled with carefully carved wood or bone picks. Even commoners kept sharpened date pits tied with string for after-meal maintenance. You're handed one after lunch. It looks like a tiny dagger and you immediately feel cooler just holding it. But it's not just about getting food out of your teeth. It's about knowing how food gets into them too. One older kitchen attendant sits down next to you, toothpick in mouth, and explains the culinary teeth connection with the gravity of someone reciting scripture. A soft tooth, she says, can't handle sour tamarind, and chewing roasted barley without training. Foolish, dangerous, embarrassing. You nod slowly. You've already made all three mistakes. Turns out, different dishes required different dental preparation. For crispy lentil flatbread S, chew a stringent bark beforehand to tighten the gums. For sticky dates or molasses candies, rinse with vinegar water to create mouth slickness. For chewy lime, it's advised to pre-chew a mild root for 5 minutes to wake up the molars. You ask if people really followed all that. Your table mate snorts. Do nobles follow it? Sometimes. Do cooks? Always. Even the structure of meals reflected this. A typical noble meal might begin with a bitter herb rinse, then go through 4 or 5 courses designed to engage the mouth like a training circuit, from soft to crunchy, hot to chilled, sweet to sharp, and then, of course, a round of cleansing. No one left the table without at least rinsing 3 times. There were even dining games. One involved trying to talk after chewing a leaf soaked in sour plum juice. Another, more advanced version, had people recite poetry while holding cloves between their teeth. Losers had to clean the pomegranate grinder. Brutal. Modern historians have some records of these habits, but there's still debate on how widespread or exaggerated they were. Some think it was just elite showmanship or aristocrats doing the ancient version of foodie yoga. Others argue that the entire culinary tradition was shaped with dental logic baked in. Meals weren't just about nourishment or flavor, but sustainability of the smile. It makes sense. Honestly, in a world without modern dentistry, prevention was everything. Food wasn't just about pleasure or status. It was interactive dental training, delicious, yes, but demanding. And as you sit there with a piece of roasted pumpkin stuck between your teeth and a toothpick that could double as a weapon, you start to respect it all a little more. Your teeth, you realize, are working class. They've battled spices. They've endured dried fruits. They've survived chewy bread that could probably hold up a tent. And now they're being carefully maintained like beloved tools, not because anyone told you to, but because it just feels right. So you rinse one more time. Not because you have to, because your mouth earned it. You've returned to the palace's quieter wing, the one where diplomats stay, travelers are received, and where languages float around like unfamiliar spices. Your guide gives you a look that says, today's lesson comes with string. You follow him into a small shaded room where 3 men sit on low cushions. They wear colorful robes that shimmer slightly in the light, and they speak a dialect you don't quite recognize, melodic, with lilting consonants. They're from the Indian subcontinent, and they've brought something that is both mysterious and, frankly, terrifying. Tooth thread. One of the men gently pulls out a thin coil of silk thread from a wooden case. It gleams slightly, coated in something herbal and sharp-smelling. He holds it up like a violinist about to begin a solo, then begins threading it between his teeth with such calm precision. It almost looks like embroidery. Your guide nods. This is called Danta Sutra. It means tooth string. You squint. Like floss. Exactly like floss, he says, but softer and slightly judgmental. You're handed a piece of thread yourself. It smells faintly of camphor and neem and invited to try. You do. Slowly, with the self-conscious intensity of someone attempting surgery on themselves without a license. It slips in easily, and somehow manages to sting, soak, and clean out that one spot you didn't know was bothering you. Your demonstrator smiles, his teeth bright and slightly smug. Clean teeth, clear heart, he says. It turns out, Indian traders and spiritual pilgrims brought more than spices and language with them when visiting the Persian Empire. They brought a dental tradition rooted in Ayurveda, with materials and techniques that felt exotic even to the Persians. Their kit includes silk thread coated in herbal resin, neem wood twigs still popular today, tiny bronze picks with lotus-shaped handles, astringent powders made from crushed shells, and dried basil. One man shows you a tongue comb, a tiny curved scraper made of copper. He uses it swiftly, rinses, then takes a sip of rose water and hums something melodic. This is how we greet the morning, he says. Persian nobles, always eager to blend elegance with practicality, quickly took note. Soon, you're told, flossing with thread became something of a courtly trend, especially among poets, diplomats, and those prone to long monologues. Thread users, your guide says, were considered more articulate. The belief was that a clean space between the teeth made room for more refined words. Modern historians are still deeply divided on just how widely adopted tooth threading was in Persia. Some claim it remained niche, a novelty for curious nobles. Others argue it quietly revolutionized elite dental hygiene and later merged into ritual cleansing routines. But here's the thing you're sold. This floss or thread or saw silk, whatever you want to call it, works. It's soft but firm, herbal but not overwhelming. Your teeth feel like they just got a massage, a diplomatic massage. The man invites you to try chewing a neem twig next. It's bitter, really bitter, like if a pine tree had regrets, but it leaves your mouth feeling alert, awake, slightly judgmental. Yes, but in a morally upright way. One of them offers a proverb: before leaving, the mouth is a river. Keep it flowing clean, and your words will never rot. And with that, they're gone, heading to their next stop with silk threads and neem sticks tucked neatly into their travel kits. You sit for a moment, still holding your little coil of floss. It's warm from your fingers now. You realize you don't just feel cleaner, you feel more thoughtful, like your brain got better acoustics. In the background, a noblewoman passes by and raises an eyebrow approvingly. She sees the thread in your hand and simply says, "Imported, but effective." You nod, and vow to never underestimate dental diplomacy again. It's still early, but the sun is high enough now to cast soft golden stripes across the inner garden. The air smells faintly of jasmine, mixed with a kind of floral seriousness. You're standing near a shaded colonnade where servants whisper instead of walk and doors open like secrets. You're not quite supposed to be here, but your guide, who at this point has either grown fond of you or simply decided he enjoys chaos, leans in and says, "Want to see something truly regal?" Of course you do. You're ushered to a concealed alcove behind a sheer curtain, not exactly spying, more like respectfully eavesdropping on history. Inside the chamber, the Queen of Persia is beginning her morning mouth ritual. No harp music, no fanfare, just precision and a level of elegance that makes you suddenly aware of your own posture. The queen is seated on a cushion of deep green silk, a small gold mirror angled before her. A servant kneels nearby, slowly unrolling a linen cloth that reveals a stunning set of oral tools, neatly arranged like jewelry. The handles are polished bone, lapis, even one made of carved obsidian. Everything gleams. But in that calm, I have seen for dynasties kind of way, the process begins with a soft tongue sweep, using what looks like a miniature bronze rake. Next, a rinse not from a cup, but poured from an amethyst vial. A slow stream of water infused with rose petals, basil, and a few crushed pearls. You're not sure whether the pearls are for flavor, symbolism, or just a flex. Possibly all three. Then comes the star of the show, a paste made from pomegranate rind, myrrh, and a rare powdered gemstone called moonstone dust. It sparkles slightly. You're told it's not abrasive, just spiritually reflective. Okay. She dips a brush carved from cypress wood into the paste and begins to clean her teeth, slowly, deliberately, like painting. Every motion is graceful. Even the pause between strokes feels intentional. This isn't brushing. This is choreography. You notice something unusual. She hums as she brushes. A soft, rhythmic melody, not quite a song, more like a mantra. Your guide whispers. It's a traditional melody said to align breath and thought. Court poets say it gives her words more weight. Honestly, it's working. After brushing, she takes a small bundle of dried herbs wrapped in silk, mint, thyme, a hint of cinnamon, and places it gently under her tongue. A cooling final note, a kind of herbal mic drop. Her final step, a dab of sandalwood oil pressed onto her cheeks and jawline. To warm the voice, your guide says, and to keep the breath anchored. You're still sitting there, awestruck, when your guide leans in again and whispers. She does this every morning, even when there are no visitors. Especially then. Some modern historians have tried to separate myth from reality when it comes to royal oral care. Did queens really use crushed gemstones in their dental routine? Did they actually hum to align their breath? The academic jury is still out. But based on what you've just seen, some myths are just extremely well-documented facts. And the queen, now standing, radiant, serene, and terrifyingly competent, walks past the curtain. For a moment, you think she might be seeing you. She pauses. Then, without turning, says quietly, "Breath is the final veil. Lift it gently." You nod. Or at least, you think you do. It's hard to be sure when your soul has momentarily stepped out for a walk. As she disappears down the corridor, your guide exhales. "Well," he says, "now you've seen what mint condition really means." You're left with a single thought. You've used toothpaste from a plastic tube. She brushes her teeth with gemstones and intention. And honestly, she wins. You're back in the market district again. But this time, you're not looking for minty powders or silk thread. You're following a different kind of lead superstition. Not the scary kind, the sleepy kind. The kind where people tie strings around things to stop them from misbehaving. "Do you want to see the weird stuff?" your guide asks. You nod. You always do. He leads you down a narrow alley, past a date vendor and a man selling dried lizards, not for snacks, you hope. Finally, you are up at a stall cluttered with beads, feathers, herbs, small stones, dried bones, and unmistakably tiny silver teeth. Yes, teeth. Charms shaped like molars, strung on linen cords or sewn into the corners of children's tunics. The vendor, an older woman with wrists full of clinking bracelets, beckons you over. "These keep the mouth safe," she says, holding up a charm carved from rosewood, from rot, lies, and sudden shouting. You nod slowly. Sure, who wouldn't want that? She explains that in many parts of the Persian Empire, especially in rural or nomadic communities, mouth charms were common. Some were worn around the neck, others tucked into pillows. A few were even baked into bread for ceremonial meals, though people were strongly encouraged to remove them before chewing. The Charms came in different varieties: tiny silver mullers to prevent tooth fetches, little cloth bundles filled with fennel, and garlic for children cutting teeth. Etched stones, meant to be rubbed against the gums while reciting protective verses, and your favorite, a charm shaped like a white smile worn by public speakers for clarity and verbal luck. One particularly striking charm is a lapis lazuli cube, said to absorb tooth demons. If placed under the tongue during sleep, your guide is quick to ADD. Don't try that. You'll choke. But people used to swear by it. Some of these practices were linked to Zoroastrian purification rites. Others were influenced by older Mesopotamian beliefs, or borrowed from tribal traditions across the empire. Over time, they blended into something uniquely Persian, part dental hygiene, part spiritual self-defense. Of course, modern scholars debate how much of this was symbolic versus sincere. Was the charm itself believed to be magical? Or was it just a physical reminder, like tying a string around your finger to rinse after dinner? No one's quite sure. But the objects have been found in graves, in temple foundations, even inside walls. One particularly famous case involved a nobleman whose entire dental toolkit was buried with him, including a bronze mirror engraved with the words, "He who speaks with clean breath speaks for the gods." You try on a charm yourself, a carved wooden incisor with a tiny emerald set in the root. It's surprisingly elegant. You feel protected, and also slightly ridiculous, but in a good way. A child tugs your sleeve and offers you a handmade charm of his own, a small sun-shaped bead tied to a twig. Keeps nightmares from chewing your dreams, he says. Very seriously. You buy it immediately. And just when you think you've seen everything, the vendor pulls out one last item, a powder labeled moon dust for teeth. You ask what it does. She shrugs. Keeps your smile mysterious. You're sold. As you leave, you realize something. In a world with no dentists, no fluoride, and no animated tooth fairies, people still found ways to protect their mouths through craft, through poetry, and, occasionally, by sewing molar-shaped buttons into their bed sheets. Maybe it wasn't all scientific, but it was consistent. It was loving, and it worked. More or less. You hold the charm in your hand as you walk, feeling its little carved grooves and the smooth emerald at its base. And you think, sometimes, belief is its own kind of medicine, especially if it comes with good breath. You're back in the palace garden, the same one you first entered what feels like days ago, though in reality, it's only been one long, mint-scented morning. The air is softer now. The sun has shifted. A breeze ruffles the fig tree leaves above you, like they're whispering some last ancient thought you haven't quite earned the right to understand. You sit on a bench, chewing on a softened piece of tamarind bark, not because your teeth need it, but because you've gotten used to the idea that your mouth deserves a moment of quiet reflection. Your guide joins you, carrying a small clay jar sealed with wax. He places it in your hands. Last one, he says. The last of the batch. You turn the jar over carefully. It's pomegranate paste, the same mixture you saw being made days ago, with its grit and its glimmer, its tart scent and strange elegance. But this jar is old, very old. The label is almost worn away. The wax cracked. This, your guide says, was found in the storage room of a noble house. Still sealed. Still smells faintly of mint and charcoal. You open it slowly. The scent hits you, soft, bittersweet, dusty, like someone bottled a memory. And then he says the part that hits harder than the pasty vinegar edge, no one makes it anymore. You blink. No one. He nods. Not like this. The ingredients are still around. Yes, but the ritual, the rhythm, gone. He explains gently that over time, as new empires rose, as Greek influence spread, as trade routes brought cinnamon and cloves and strange new powders, the old pomegranate recipes began to fade. Neem replaced tamarind. Resin gave way to quick chews and oils. Tongue scrapers became purely medical tools, stripped of their quiet ceremony. Even the floss, that elegant thread soaked in herbs, turned into something simpler, more effective, perhaps, but less poetic. People still brushed. Of course, they always have. But the act stopped being slow. It stopped being a way of centering yourself, and instead became another test on a checklist. Historians don't entirely agree on why. Some point to shifting religious priorities. Others to economic changes. A busy trader doesn't have time for moonstone powder and humming in the mirror. A few blame war. A few blame science. One particularly poetic scholar once said, "The pomegranate paste died not from failure, but from success because it worked too well to remain sacred." Still, there are fragments left, ritual rinses before prayer, old recipes in forgotten scrolls, grandmothers who passed down bark chewing habits without knowing why they do it. Even the word for toothpaste in some modern Persian dialects carries a root that hints back to this fruit, an etymological fossil. You close the jar. You look at your hands, a little dusty, slightly sticky, oddly proud, and you realize you've just lived a ritual that almost disappeared. A toothbrush wasn't just a tool. It was a philosophy. Pomegranate wasn't just for dessert. It was devotion. And your teeth, they were never just for eating or speaking. They were for carrying wisdom. 2. Your guide rises, dusts off his tunic, and says, "It was always about more than hygiene." And you believe him, not because he said it well, but because your mouth feels clean, calm, and a little bit holy. You walk out of the garden slowly, past the palace, past the market, back toward your own world where brushing is fast. Toothpaste comes in plastic, and no one hums into a mirror anymore. But something lingers. A taste, a pause, a fragment of pomegranate, still stuck between your teeth, and that feels just right. And now, here you are. The palace gates are long behind you. The pomegranate paste has faded from your tongue. Your feet are lighter than when you arrived, and maybe, just maybe, your breath is too. The world around you is quiet now. That kind of quiet that hums instead of echoes. Maybe there's a fan spinning softly beside you, or a breeze drifting in from a half-open window. Maybe the only sound left is your own breath, steady, gentle, like waves you forgot you were floating on. You don't need to remember every detail of tonight's journey. You don't need to hold onto the name of every resin, or every tool, or every poetic metaphor about maulers and moonlight, because what matters isn't the facts. It's the feeling, the warmth of tradition, the rhythm of slow, intentional care, the strange but tender truth that, even 2,000 years ago, someone was standing at the start of their day, cleaning their teeth, calming their thoughts, and readying their mouth to speak something kind. So if you're still here, still listening, maybe now's the time to let your jaw unclench, let your shoulders drop, let your thoughts wander like steam from a copper kettle. You're not in ancient Persia anymore. You're in your bed, or your couch, or your quiet little corner of the world. But maybe, in some soft, sleepy way, you're also still there, standing in the shade of a fig tree, holding a twig between your teeth, feeling the hush of a day not yet begun. And if that makes you smile just a little, then the story did its job.